So what we'll look at now is what we call the anatomy of the lung, really. So we're going to look at what is a lung made up of. It's not just a sac of air, it's got quite a few things to it to help it work. So in each lung, we've got a number of lobes. One has three, one has two, in order to accommodate the heart. Then we've got this, what's called a pleural membrane and cavity. And this is simply like a surrounding bag that keeps the lobes together. It's quite important that, and that's got a pleural fluid inside to allow the lung to expand as wide as it does. Then you've got your thoracic cavity, and this is just it's what we call the area that all this is held in. We've got the alveoli, which sit right inside, and you've got loads and loads of these in the lungs, and that's where your gas exchange takes place. And then your diaphragm, a piece of muscle that will help lift the lungs and lower the lungs to allow us to draw air in and push air out. So looking at the lobes then, the left lung contains two, the one on the right has got three. And it does have its own artery and vein, each individual lobe, as it receives air through the bronchus. So as we can see here, you've got a superior lobe at the top. They're relatively large, and that's probably what you're going to use the majority of the day, just normal breathing in and out, dead relaxed. As you then start to exercise, that's when the other lobes become more effective. So breathing in as deeply as you can is then going to activate these two lobes and get them used. So each lobe needs its own blood supply in order to be connected to the alveoli. So your pleural membrane and cavity, this is just a sheath that covers each individual lung. So the outer membrane is known as the parietal pleura, which is closest to the ribs. So if you imagine between the ribs and the lung, it's rubbing against the ribs to keep it a good fluent movement as you breathe in and out. The inner membrane is visceral, which is closest to the lungs. So in relation to this, if you think back to our thinking about anatomy and the human aspects, like you've got peripheral, so it's all there, okay. If you think that means peripheral, it means towards the skin, it's towards the outer layer. Now, one that we haven't covered was visceral, and that basically just means closer in. So people that have visceral fat, it means fat that sits in and around the organs to protect the organs. So parietal pleura is what is closest to the ribs. Visceral pleura is closest to the lungs. And then between those two small bags, so you've got like an outer bag and an inner bag. Between those bags, you've got a pleural cavity, and that's filled with the pleural fluid. And this fluid allows the free movement of the lungs to go in and out as they do. So as you can see here, if we were to dissect the lung, this outer layer here, this is the bit that would rub against the ribs. Then you've got an inner layer there, and in between that, this cavity, that's where you've got the fluid in there. And on a more basic drawing, outer layer there is the parietal, and then on the inner you've got your visceral. Your thoracic cavity then, everything we've just discussed there, the lungs, the chest, it's all held within this cavity, and it's protected by your rib cage, really, your thoracic cage. So that part of your spine that's got any ribs connected to it, that's all protecting your lungs. So the lowest part of that cavity is your diaphragm. Your alveoli, right inside the lungs now, you've got about 3 million of these inside the lungs, and this is all designed for gas exchange. So each alveoli is going to have its own capillary network surrounding it, and remember, capillaries are only one cell thick, so this is going to then allow the blood cells to release this, kind of the CO2 and pick up the oxygen, and then keep moving that around the body. And we'll watch that in class. That just shows how the alveoli work when we breathe. The diaphragm, this is a muscle. Okay, we can control this, but it can work involuntary as well. For example, when we sleep, the brain will take over that and help you breathe in the night. So this will contract and will increase the volume of the chest wall. So as you contract, it will lift up, and that will bring the ribs out to help you breathe in. So as the air draws in, it gets to a point where we can't breathe any more in, and then when it relaxes, it will recoil, and that will help force air out of the lungs. And again, another video to show you that. Now, in between that, all the ribs also help with breathing, especially forceful breathing. So these help us to inhale and exhale. Your internal intercostals just sit on the inside of the ribs. These draw the ribs down to help the air be pushed out. And then the external ones are just on the outer layer, more towards the skin. And this helps to bring the ribs up. So when they contract, they will bring the ribs up, open the chest wall,